out this weekend. Here is everything you need to know before heading into the theater to see A Quiet Place Day 1. 2018's A Quiet Place follows the Abbott family trying to survive in a new world that is inhabited by otherworldly creatures that hunt entirely by sound. The movie is surprisingly dark, opening with the death of their then youngest child. It really doesn't pull any punches about how much noise can be made and how quickly the creatures will flock to you if you're too loud. After that opening, we cut to a little over a year later, and we see the strained relationship between father Lee Abbott and eldest daughter Reagan, who is deaf. She blames herself for her youngest brother's death and wants to prove herself capable of saving her family. We also see that their mother, Evelyn, is now pregnant, which acts like a doomsday clock kind of in the movie, because nothing about childbirth or even raising a newborn baby is silent. Definitely not silent enough to be safe. The movie, I think to most of our surprise, worked incredibly well with very minimal audible dialogue and a near silent score. I remember the theater experience for this because it was so singular in that everybody in my theater was so quiet, even when trying to eat popcorn or eat their snacks, because the situation the movie puts you in and the dire situation that this family is in, you feel like you also have to be silent while watching the movie. That, and it's the perfect what if movie, asking the audience to kind of imagine what you would do in order to survive, or if you would survive at all. And Reagan is a great protagonist for this. Her being deaf clearly gives the family an advantage when it comes to communication, as they already know how to sign before this happens. But her not being able to hear also presents a conflict, because she can't hear if something is too loud around her, nor would she be able to hear if a creature was nearby. But the movie ends with Reagan realizing her cochlear implant can be used as a weapon against the creatures due to the high-pitched noise created whenever she's near one. Then we have A Quiet Place Part 2, which came out in 2020, and it picks up immediately where Part 1 ended off. Still reeling from Lee's death in the first film, the Abbott family leave their farm to look for other survivors. They find Emmett, an old friend of the family who is at first reluctant to help them. He ends up having to leave the safe space that he's created for himself when Reagan goes off following a signal of potential survivors on a nearby island. She's setting off in particular to hopefully use her implant with their radio in the hopes of giving other survivors a chance to kill the creatures. The main conflict in this movie, aside from the obvious, the monsters, is the almost like near breakdown of this family. They lost Lee and now they have a new infant to care for, and all of this brings about new challenges to stay silent, especially with Evelyn, who is now like the only adult in this family, and she struggles a little bit, I think, to keep everyone safe right at the beginning. After leaving their farm, they immediately set off a series of traps when they get to the foundry, one in particular that injures Marcus, so that leaves him unable to really move about or help, and then Reagan goes off on her own to find this radio station. Things get crazy. We are finally able to see in Part 2 how maybe a few other people have been surviving. Obviously with Emmett, their family friend that we meet at the beginning of the film. Emmett and Reagan also encounter more unsavory types. Like with any kind of apocalyptic film, there is the realization that like some of the people that are going to survive in this situation are not really the kind of people you might want to be around. But Reagan does eventually find the island, and it's a much more like harmonious community that has been able to make it there and survive. And with that brings a new important bit of knowledge for these creatures, that they can't swim. So as long as they're not given a solid way across a body of water, you could be safe on, say, an island like this community, and not really be subjected to being silent. The movie surprisingly ends on a cliffhanger. It's like kind of hopeful, but could be dark in that we don't know what happens. So Reagan does make it to the island radio station and is able to defeat the creature that makes it there on a boat. Simultaneously, Marcus is able to use the signal to kill a creature that is threatening him and his mother back in the foundry. The film ends with Reagan leaving her implant on the microphone so other people can use the signal. But we don't know if this actually works for anyone else. Like, we don't know if anyone else is able to figure out how to use the signal in order to kill the creatures. So going into the prequel, obviously as the audience, we have the advantage of knowing about these creatures from the previous two films. We know that they are completely blind and that they hunt entirely by sound and that they are super fast. And also, like I said, they can't swim and they are pretty damn near indestructible, except obviously when their insides are exposed. And we do know of one recognizable character that we're going to see in day one. In day one, it looks like his name is Henri, played by Jimon Hansu. Reagan and Emmett meet him on the island community in part 2. So we know at least he's gonna make it out of the city in day 1, but we do see him dragged off by a creature in part 2 as well. We don't know if Lupita Nyong'o's character will make it out with him. Maybe in day 1, we will learn a bit more about these creatures and maybe how they came to Earth. In part 1, in Lee's kind of like basement radio area, we see a bunch of newspaper clippings talking about the creatures. So we know at least in the early stages of this like apocalypse, some people were still able to maybe communicate with each other about the creatures and get out some information, at least for a time. My personal hope is that we learn some more information about the creature, because I am dubious about this being, you know, like it's called day 1. But in part 2, we did get at least a little bit of a taste of how day 1 went, at least for the Abbott family. The first 10 minutes or so show the creatures first arriving to their town. So I'm interested to see what else they bring to the table with these creatures. The previous movies are obviously focused on one family, with part 2 kind of bringing into play some other different types of communities that have formed. So it'll be interesting to see those themes repeated in day 1, where people are definitely gonna have to be able to come together to survive. And at least from the trailer, it looks like Lupita Nyong'o's character is going it solo, at least for a little bit. Let me know your thoughts on the Quiet Place movies so far and what you're most excited about in day 1, or if you're excited for it at all. I will see you this Friday, obviously with a review of A Quiet Place day 1. Until then, stay strange. Bye.